Hello, I've been working in a small office for a few months. So far, I and a colleague who is a student were hired, and all the previous employees left at the same time when I started working. A new colleague appeared who I have to train, but the problem is that she came yesterday and is already treating me as if she were my boss. They gave her a trial project of mine to do the same, and she really wanted to find a mistake in me. Today, she interrupted me and started talking to a client while I was talking to him as if he was on a percentage. Then she mumbled something, apologizing. She also had an assignment to do something I had to show her because, of course, she doesn't know how she couldn't do it either, a problem with the computer. She said to send me something and I should do it. Then she literally took the contract out of my hands. I had to print it again and I could barely sign it. My hands were shaking. Then she wrote to the boss the next second that she had finished her work. I've never been in a situation like this before and I don't know how to react. What would you advise me to do? Should I just jump in and tell her everything, or should I turn to my boss, with whom I supposedly get along? We've talked to her about how words matter, and we've discussed various situations before. And should I also mention that my new colleague's salary is higher? They were supposed to raise mine after the first month, but I haven't said anything yet, and they are completely and honestly speaking, the salary is very low for this job. I don't have enough money to support myself and pay for my accommodation, and there's no question of pampering myself. Who should I talk to about the salary? The boss who interviewed me, or the boss, her husband, on whom everything depends? Wow. So that was a real post from someone who's feeling, well, completely trapped in a really stressful work situation. And listen, if any part of that story resonated with you, that anxiety, that confusion, that feeling of just being totally undermined, I want you to know you are definitely not alone. This is a surprisingly common and really difficult workplace problem. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the psychology behind what's happening and, more importantly, give you a clear strategic plan to help you take back control. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to deconstruct this whole dilemma and really understand the power dynamic that's going on. Then we'll get super practical with tools for setting boundaries and having that tough chat with management. We'll also tackle the tricky salary negotiation piece. And finally, we're going to pull it all together into a simple 4-step action plan you can use. All right, let's get right to it and decode what's actually happening here. The first thing you've got to realize is that these actions, the interruptions, the grabbing of tasks, they aren't just random bits of rudeness. No, they're actually part of a very recognizable pattern, one that even has a specific name in psychology. So this pattern, it's often called a demonstration of dominance. But here's the absolute key to understanding it, and this is so important. This kind of behavior almost never comes from a place of strength. It's actually rooted in insecurity. And just by giving it a name, right, it helps us take a step back. We can shift from feeling personally attacked to actually understanding what's going on analytically. So let's play detective for a second. What could possibly be motivating this person? Well, it could be a deep-seated insecurity about being in a new, unfamiliar role. Or, maybe it's just a really strong desire to impress the boss, like right now. It could even be something as simple as a genuine misunderstanding of who does what. The point is, when you start to see these potential drivers, it helps take the sting out of it. It depersonalizes the whole thing. Suddenly, it becomes way less about you and a whole lot more about their own internal struggles. Okay, so we've got a handle on the why behind the behavior. Now let's switch gears to the how. As in, how do you actually respond in those incredibly tense moments? Without making things worse, but also without feeling like a doormat. The absolute key, the superpower here, is learning how to set clear, calm boundaries. And your most effective tool, it's not going to be anger, and it's not a big confrontation. It's a calm, firm, and direct response. The secret sauce here is using what we call I statements. See, this technique is all about focusing on your perspective and your needs. And what that does is it makes it way harder for the other person to argue with you, and it's much less likely to make them get all defensive. So, what does that actually sound like in the real world? Well, instead of an accusation like, hey, you're interrupting me, you use a calm directive like this one. It's polite, yeah, but it's also incredibly firm. It sets a crystal clear boundary right there in the moment. You're taking back control without blowing things up into a huge fight. And hey, I know it can feel weird at first, so practice saying a phrase like this out loud. That way, it'll just roll off your tongue when you really need it. Okay, setting boundaries in the moment, that's like your first line of defense. It's the immediate fix. But for a problem that keeps happening, you're probably going to need to bring in your manager. Now, the absolute key here, and I can't stress this enough, is how you frame it. You have to approach this conversation not as someone who's there to complain, but as someone who wants to find a solution. Just look at the difference here. On one side, you've got the reactive, emotional approach. This is usually driven by frustration, and honestly, it often backfires. It can just make you look unprofessional. But on the other side, that's the proactive, factual approach. This is strategic. It's about describing specific behaviors, talking about how it's affecting the work and the clients, and positioning yourself as a problem solver. And please, schedule a real meeting for this. Don't just ambush your boss in the hallway right after something happens. And here it is. This is pretty much the perfect way to frame that conversation. A phrase like this immediately tells your boss that you're not there just to vent or complain. You're there to make things better. It's an invitation for them to partner with you to find a solution. And trust me, that is a much, much more powerful place to be. All right, let's switch gears and talk about that other huge issue from the post, the money. Your salary. This needs the exact same kind of strategic, fact-based approach we just talked about. That feeling of being underpaid, it's completely valid. But how you bring it up is going to make all the difference. You absolutely have to go into this conversation prepared. This is not the time to rely on your memory or your feelings. You need to do your homework. Document everything, your specific achievements, the projects you've knocked out of the park, any positive results you've gotten. You can even remind them about that initial agreement to review your salary. You're essentially building a case for yourself, and that case needs to be built on a solid foundation of facts. Okay, listen up, because this is probably the most crucial piece of advice for this part. You have to make the conversation about your performance and your value. That's it. The second you bring up what the new colleague is earning, you've lost. You risk sounding like it's all about jealousy, not about your actual merit. This negotiation is about what you bring to the table. Period. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, right? From the deep psychology of the conflict all the way to some word-for-word scripts you can use. So now let's boil it all down into one clear action plan. This is your path forward. Here we go, your 4 simple steps. Step 1, document everything. Keep a private, factual log of what's been happening. Step 2, set those boundaries in the moment. Practice and use those calm, direct I statements. Step 3, talk to your boss about the workflow. Frame it as a search for a solution, not just a complaint session. And finally, step 4, schedule that salary talk. But make sure you come prepared with all your documented achievements. You see, this plan, it gives you back your power. It takes you from feeling like a victim of the situation to being the one who's actually designing the solution. You have the tools. You have the strategy. So the only question left is the one you see right now. What is that first step you're going to take to advocate for yourself?